Ask anyone to name the Great American Earthquake, and you will hear the same answer. San Francisco, 1906, California. It is the wrong answer. The most powerful earthquake in the recorded history of North America did not happen in California. It was not close. The strongest quake California has ever produced was around magnitude 7.9. The earthquake we are talking about today was magnitude 9.2, hundreds of times more powerful, the second strongest earthquake ever measured anywhere on planet Earth. And it struck the United States within living memory. On a quiet holiday evening at exactly 5:36 p.m., while families sat down to dinner, the ground began to move, and it did not stop, for 4.5 minutes. Think about what that number means. The shaking most people experience in a lifetime lasts seconds. Imagine standing in your kitchen, unable to walk, watching cracks open and slam shut in the floor for the length of an entire song on the radio, and then another, with no way to know if it will ever end. Before it was over, a neighborhood in an American city slid toward the sea. A main street dropped 10 feet in front of shoppers. Entire ports vanished. The ocean itself rose and crossed thousands of miles to kill people in 4 different states. And the science of geology was changed forever. This is the story of the Great Alaska Earthquake, the giant America forgot. And by the end of this video, you will understand why every tsunami siren on the West Coast today traces directly back to that one evening. First, let us put magnitude 9.2 into honest perspective, because the earthquake scale hides its own violence. The scale is logarithmic. Every full step up releases about 32 times more energy. So a 9.2 is not a little bigger than the 7.9 that flattened San Francisco. It releases on the order of 500 times more energy. In that 4.5 minutes, the fault under Alaska released more energy than tens of thousands of atomic bombs, more than all the earthquakes on Earth from years combined. Only one earthquake in all of recorded human history has ever exceeded it. The 1960 Chile event. This was not a big earthquake. This was the planet adjusting itself, with people standing on top. And it came from the same machine we have met before on this channel. If you watched our Cascadia episode, you already know the machine. A subduction zone, where an ocean plate dives beneath a continent. The only kind of fault on Earth capable of magnitude 9. Along the southern coast of Alaska, the Pacific Plate is diving under North America at a couple of inches per year, and by March of 1964, a section of that boundary hundreds of miles long had been locked, silently loading for centuries. On the evening of March 27th, Good Friday, it failed. The rupture tore along roughly 600 miles of the plate boundary, a fracture longer than most American states, unzipping for minute after minute, which is exactly why the shaking lasted so impossibly long. Short faults make short earthquakes. This rupture was so vast that the beginning of it was still sending out waves while the far end was just getting started. Now, come stand in Anchorage, Alaska's largest city, about 75 miles from where the rupture began. It is 5:36 in the evening. Because it is Good Friday, schools are closed, offices emptied early, families are home. Remember that detail. It is about to save hundreds of lives. The shaking begins gently, the way big quakes often do. A rumble people mistake for a truck. Then it builds and builds. Within half a minute, no one in Anchorage can stand without holding something. Cars bounce in place with their brakes on. Trees whip back and forth to the ground. Witnesses describe the earth itself moving in visible rolling waves, the solid ground behaving like the deck of a ship in a storm, cracks yawning open, slamming shut, spouting mud. And it keeps going. 1 minute, 2 minutes. People later said the worst part was not the violence. It was the duration, the growing, reasonable certainty that the world was actually ending. 4.5 minutes is longer than this section of the video has taken so far. Downtown, 4th Avenue, the heart of the city, simply dropped. One entire side of the street, shops, bars, theaters, sank 10 feet as the ground beneath it slid sideways, leaving storefronts sitting in a trench with their signs at sidewalk level. Photographs of that street became the defining images of the disaster. A city block that looks cut by a giant knife. Cars parked at the bottom of a new cliff that had been level pavement 5 minutes earlier. A brand new department store. 5 stories of concrete. Shed its facade into the street in slabs, crushing cars at the curb. A control tower at the airport collapsed, killing the controller inside at his post, guiding aircraft until the structure failed around him. Power died across the city. Gas hissed from broken mains, and with the temperature below freezing and night coming on, a shattered northern city faced its first hours of disaster in the dark, in the snow, with aftershocks, some of them major earthquakes in their own right, rolling through every few minutes. And in the northwest of the city, in the modern hillside neighborhood of Turnagain Heights, the ground itself committed the great betrayal of that evening. The bluffs there are built on a layer called Bootlegger Cove clay, a soil that behaves perfectly until it is shaken hard and long, and then, like the liquefaction we covered at New Madrid, it turns to something like grease. 2 minutes into the shaking, the entire bluff let go and began flowing toward the sea, carrying the neighborhood with it. 75 homes, some of the finest in Alaska, rode a slow-motion avalanche of liquefied earth, breaking apart as the ground beneath them stretched into ridges and chasms, the land moving hundreds of feet toward the water. Families scrambled out of houses that were tearing in half around them, jumping over crevasses that opened and closed. Most escaped, not all. When it finally stopped, the neighborhood was a frozen sea of wreckage, roofs at wild angles poking from broken ground, a landscape that photographs still struggle to make believable. And the city eventually gave up on rebuilding it. Much of the slide area was left as parkland, and if you walk it today, locals call part of it Earthquake Park. You are walking on the churned remains of 1964, a neighborhood the earth swallowed and never gave back. And a school in the city, a large elementary school, had been split cleanly in two, one wing dropped away from the other, a building full of empty classrooms. On any ordinary Friday at that hour, it would not have been empty. Good Friday was the difference, but Anchorage, shattered as it was the lucky place. Anchorage got the shaking. The coast got the sea. Here is what most people have never been taught about this earthquake. The killer was not the quake. Of the roughly 131 people who died that evening and night, only a small handful died from the shaking itself. Nearly everyone else was killed by water. And the water came in 2 completely different ways, a distinction that matters to every coastal community in America today. The first way was local, instant, and merciless. All along the fjords of the Alaskan coast, the violent shaking shook loose underwater landslides, deltas of loose sediment collapsing into deep water, and each collapse threw up its own tsunami, arriving not in hours, but in minutes, sometimes seconds, with no warning possible even in principle. In the port town of Valdez, a supply ship was tied up at the dock, and because its arrival was an event in a small Alaska town, more than 24 people, many of them children, had come down to watch it unload. When the shaking began, the entire waterfront, the dock, the warehouses, the ground itself, collapsed into the bay as the sediment beneath it failed. 32 people on and around that dock were gone in moments. The ship itself was heaved upward by the churning water, slammed into the harbor bottom, and somehow survived to carry its crew out. The town of Valdez was so completely undermined that engineers later condemned the entire site. And the town you can visit today was rebuilt from scratch, 4 miles away, on solid rock. The original Valdez was abandoned to the grass. In Seward, the waterfront slid into the bay the same way, rupturing oil storage tanks as it went, and the oil caught fire on the water. Minutes later, the tsunami arrived, and witnesses described something out of a nightmare, a wave of burning water, fire riding the flood into town, incinerating the rail yards. In the native village of Chenega, on an island in Prince William Sound, the sea rose and took a third of the entire population. 23 people from a village of 76, the highest proportional loss anywhere that night. Whittier lost 13. Up and down the coast, the pattern repeated, the shaking, then the sea, within minutes. And then there was the second kind of wave, the one the whole Pacific would meet. The earthquake had not just shaken the seafloor, it had permanently moved it. Across a region larger than some states, the land itself was rearranged. Some areas thrust upward. Parts of one island rose as much as 38 feet, draining harbors and lifting seafloors into the air, while other regions sank 8 feet, drowning forests in salt water and creating, note this, ghost forests. The exact same signature we found on the Cascadia coast from 1700. That wholesale displacement of the seafloor shoved the entire ocean above it, and a tsunami spread outward across the Pacific at jetliner speeds. Hours later, in the middle of the night, it reached the west coast of the contiguous United States. At a campground on the Oregon coast, a family sleeping on the beach was caught by the surge, and 4 children were lost. And in Crescent City, a small logging town in far northern California, the sea arrived in a sequence of waves, and the town made a fatal, very human mistake. After the first waves came in modest and manageable, people returned to the waterfront to clean up and check their businesses. It felt reasonable. It felt safe. The ocean had done its thing and settled. But tsunamis are not single waves. They are trains of them, often hours long, and the biggest is frequently not the first. The fourth wave was the largest, over 20 feet, and it destroyed the downtown, crushing buildings, sweeping cars, killing 11 people there. Many of them, people who had already survived the earlier waves and gone back. That mistake, going back too soon, is now taught in every tsunami education program on the West Coast, written in Crescent City's losses. The rule the town paid for is simple. A tsunami is over when officials say it is over, not when the water looks calm. Read the irony of geography in that. An earthquake in Alaska killed Californians in their own state that same night, while California's famous fault, the San Andreas, has never produced anything remotely like it. The Great American Earthquake was never Californian. The Great American Earthquake travels. Now, the merciful arithmetic, because this is the part that stuns everyone who studies 1964. A magnitude 9.2, striking a modern nation, total deaths, roughly 131. The same size earthquake off Japan in 2011 killed nearly 20,000 people. Why was Alaska spared a death toll in the tens of thousands? Partly, the land itself. Alaska was and is sparsely populated. The Great Rupture Zone faced mostly empty coast, partly the clock and the calendar, schools empty on a holiday, families home together instead of scattered, docks and downtowns quieter than a working day. Partly the tide, low when the waves struck many places. It was, in the coldest honest terms, a near miss, a full-scale demonstration of a magnitude 9 against a small audience. The physics was identical to a catastrophe. The casualty list was not. And that gap between what happened and what could have happened is precisely what the scientists of 1964 refused to waste. Because here is the part of this story that changed the world, and almost nobody knows it. In 1964, the theory of plate tectonics, the idea that the Earth's surface is made of moving plates, the foundation of everything this channel talks about, was still being argued. Respected geologists still doubted it. The evidence was scattered, the mechanisms disputed, and the giant earthquakes of the world had no agreed explanation. After the earthquake, a geologist named George Plafker was sent north to map what had happened, and he did something painstaking and brilliant. He surveyed the barnacle lines, because barnacles live at a precise height relative to the tide, and where the land had risen, whole bands of dead barnacles now sat high and dry above the water, a natural measuring stick painted on every rock of the coast. He mapped the dead forests, the raised beaches, the drowned meadows, measuring exactly where the land had risen and where it had sunk, across hundreds of miles of wilderness coastline, and the pattern he mapped could be explained by only one thing: a gently dipping fault, an ocean plate sliding beneath the continent, a megathrust. His work on this earthquake, published in the years that followed, became one of the decisive proofs that subduction is real, that plate tectonics is real. Let that register. The modern understanding of how our planet works, the the framework behind every episode of this channel, Cascadia, the Ring of Fire, all of it was cemented by this one earthquake. Alaska did not just break the ground, it broke a scientific stalemate. And the second legacy is protecting you right now. Before 1964, the United States had essentially no tsunami warning capability for its own west coast. The waves that killed people in Oregon and California that night arrived unannounced, hours after the earthquake, hours in which warnings were technically possible and did not effectively happen. The disaster forced the change. Within a few years, the government established a dedicated tsunami warning center for Alaska and the West Coast, which grew into today's National Tsunami Warning Center, staffed around the clock, in Palmer, Alaska, within sight of mountains that shook in '64. Every buoy in the deep Pacific measuring the passage of tsunami waves, every siren on the Oregon coast, every evacuation map in every West Coast beach town, every alert that will someday save lives when Cascadia finally goes. All of it is downstream of Good Friday, 1964. The earthquake wrote the tuition check for the entire warning system, and the coast has been attending that school ever since. So, 3 futures, because even a historical earthquake points forward. Future 1, the most likely in any year. Alaska does what Alaska always does. It shakes constantly. More large earthquakes than every other state combined. The ground crackling with small and moderate events. The warning center watching. And nothing historic happens. Most years are this year. Future 2, the middle path, and over decades, close to a certainty. A major quake, magnitude 7, even 8, somewhere along the Aleutian Arc. A tsunami warning for the Pacific, coastal towns evacuating in good order. The system built after '64 doing exactly what it was built to do. This has already happened multiple times in recent memory, and it will happen again. Future 3, the repeat. The 1964 rupture zone itself is reloading. The plates never stopped converging, though its next great rupture is likely centuries out. But the Aleutian boundary is long, and other segments, loaded and silent, face across the Pacific toward Hawaii and the West Coast. Another Alaskan magnitude 9 is not a question of if. It is the same answer we found at Cascadia, a question of which segment and when. The difference between '64 and next time is that next time, the ocean will be watched every second of the way. Here's my honest opinion. After everything the research shows, 1964 is the most important earthquake Americans have never heard of. And the reason they have never heard of it is almost funny. It was too far away, too few died, and it happened to the wrong state. If those 4.5 minutes had struck Seattle or Los Angeles, it would be the defining event in American history, taught in every school. Instead, the greatest earthquake this continent has ever recorded became a footnote, while a quake 500 times weaker, San Francisco, kept the fame. But the Earth does not care about fame. The machine that built 1964 is the same machine aimed at the Pacific Northwest today, and Alaska gave America something priceless, a full dress rehearsal of a magnitude 9 with the smallest possible audience, and a complete scientific record. We were shown, in exact detail, what is coming for Cascadia. The only question history will ask is whether we studied the rehearsal. So, now I want to hear from you. And for some of you, this one is personal. Do you remember 1964? Were you or your family in Alaska that Good Friday? Or did the tsunami touch your coast in Oregon or California? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you were younger, tell me honestly, did you know America's strongest earthquake was in Alaska? Or did you assume California like everyone else? If this video taught you something school never did, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And subscribe with notifications on. Because next, we stay in Alaska for the single most unbelievable event this channel will ever cover. The tallest wave in recorded human history. 1,720 feet, taller than the Empire State Building. It happened in an American bay. It is fully documented, and a fisherman and his young son, anchored in that bay, rode over the top of it and lived to describe it. That story is next. The ground beneath America is speaking. Make sure you are listening.